guys so much for sticking around. I had no idea. Very impressed. So we're here to talk about disruption. Disruption is a big word these days. It was over 20 years ago that Clayton Christensen wrote Innovator's Dilemma, which was kind of the Bible of disruption at the time. A lot's changed since then. Why is disruption so important now?
Well, I think disruption has never left us, but I think in many ways that the biggest change is how we actually can create disruption. And the biggest change when Clay wrote the book, and he actually said, it'd be great if companies see this coming and can do something about it. And my opening case study is Knight Ridder, a newspaper company, and they took all of Clay's advice and applied it really well and still failed. And one of the biggest problems, I think, is that when you think about the huge cultural change, strategy change, and the leadership that has to change, a lot of times we're not willing to move off of where we are today to go into that. The difference is that we have a lot more case studies, so people know that this is a huge problem, you better do it really fast. And then the second thing is we have new technologies now that can spread that idea of what we're trying to do and unite an organization, and frankly, unite an ecosystem around an organization, around that change. Clay fundamentally said big organizations can't change, can't turn that battleship. And today you can, because now people at the front line and people at the boardroom can be absolutely connected right from the get-go. And because of that connection, we actually have a fighting chance to make that change happen.
It's great, it's good, positive. So what do most companies get wrong these days? Clearly, not every company out there is disrupting. There's a lot of ones that are really slow moving. What are they getting wrong?
And I can say this as a technology analyst, they keep looking for that magic bullet, that technology, the shiny object, the easy button, whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't exist. The reality is, if you think about the most disruptive companies out there, what were the new technologies behind it? What was the new technology behind Uber? Mobile phone, that's been around for a while. But they took a need that was not met, being able to find a ride and know that it's coming for me. They identified a need of a future customer who didn't exist, and they focused on that completely. And so startups do this really well because they don't have an installed base. How do larger organizations do this? And the major reason why they can is because they're so focused not just on customers, but today's customers, and they find it so hard to move off of them to think about the future customer. So that's the big difference. If you can't focus on the future opportunity, you're never going to be able to make the hard decisions in the investments today.
The idea of the future customer is core to your thesis in the book. What's so important about the future customer, and how do you really define what a future customer is?
It's so hard, and just a raise of hands here. How many people know who your future customer is? Oh, wow, a couple people do. That's pretty good. But it's very rare because we're so focused on what's happening today. And as I said before, I like the quote of Wayne Gretzky. He skated to where the puck was going to be, and he could beat every single one of his competitors and teammates to that puck because he could anticipate where it was going to be. And when you're trying to be disruptive, to take advantage of these new opportunities, you have to know where that customer is going, where that puck is going, and turn everything in your organizations into this huge future customer sensing machine. I think about everybody growing radar ears and being on the lookout for that future customer. Are we right about our guess? Are we right about our hypothesis? And when you find evidence of that, spread it very quickly across your organization. Hey, I found one over here. This is what they're saying. This is what they need. Let's go focus on this some more. Anyone else see more of those future customers around?
Yeah. One of the most compelling examples that you shared with me beforehand that I read in the book was Adobe. I certainly know about Adobe. I know the Adobe story. I did not know what they actually went through to transform the organization. Having founded a company that eventually went public and then watched it kind of die on the public markets because it was so much pressure for quarterly numbers, and it was painful to watch this thing happen. I know how hard it is to be a public company and have investors push you for growth and certain expectations. What Adobe went through was pretty incredible. I thought, in terms of understanding a future customer story, that's a great one. I wonder if you could share that one.
Share it really quickly. So what Adobe did is they had their Creative Suite product, which is packaged software, and they realized it needed to go into the cloud. So go into Creative Cloud. So all of us are using Creative Cloud. Creative Suite no longer exists. But that transition of going from packaged software, where you can recognize all of your revenues upfront, to cloud was going to be horrendous. So they knew in doing this switch, an existing company, public company with installed base, it would take them 2 years of declining revenues and declining income. So how do you go to the street and say, I got great news for you? Our income is going to tank over 2 years, and it's going to be great for the business. And that is exactly what the CFO did. And so when I asked him, how did you have the guts to go do this? And he said, we had to tell them the story about our future customer, about what those needs were. And granted, that future customer didn't exist. Nobody was asking for this. So it was a long, hard slog for them to make the case, make the big bet. And what I say, they took a big, huge gulp. Literally held their hands together as an executive team. It's like, we're doing this. We're going to do this. And then once they decided, they never blinked, no matter how many, I think 100,000 customers signed a petition saying, we want to go back. And they went, nope, no going back. We're burning the boats. So that takes incredible guts. And I have a great chart in the book that shows the revenues going down, the income tanking, and the stock price just taking off. Increased 10x over the past 8 years because they had the guts to go do this. Yeah. And it was only because they could identify and articulate what the future customer needed, even though that person didn't exist.
I think a lot of companies talk about customer centricity. It's, we're customer centric, we care about our customers, but just don't back it up with action. Like, you go into these companies, how do you know if they're truly customer centric? What does that look like?
I tell them, give me 1 hour, I'll be right back. And I go walk around the organization. It's a little terrifying for them. And I go around and I ask people, so tell me, what's your strategy? Most people can't tell me what the strategy is. And then I also ask them, so who are your customers? Who are you trying to serve? What are their needs? They can't tell me. And I think what a truly customer-centric organization lives that, breathes it, values it, and that everybody can articulate who exactly they're trying to serve, and more importantly, they can talk about who their future customer is, so they're all aligned around that. I mean, I don't know how you can be customer-centric if you don't have one single customer-centric model. I talked to some organizations that have a lot of design thinking and processes, and they have 18 different models of customers. So that they may have a customer-centric focus, but they're not aligned around it. So this is about a multi-step thing about, first of all, saying customers are important, and they're customers, not transactions, but customers. That understanding them is important, and it's spread across the entire organization. And then once you have that down, then figure out, like, who are our future customers going to be? Because unless you know that, what are you aiming for? Yeah. You're going to be stuck only here and today.
I actually had a conversation last week with somebody who was pitching an idea to one of the FANG CEOs, I will not say which one, and it was a new, bold idea, and was met with, keep that over here, because that's going to disrupt this side of the business. Like, how do you get past that? How do you get past, where the majority of the revenue comes from to make a big switch like that?
I'll use Google as an example. I mean, they are a beautiful one-trick pony called search. I mean, so much of the revenue comes from that. They've diversified a bit over the past 15 years, but it's still search. So anything going after that is pretty much off limits. So they can innovate around the edges, but that core doesn't go away, and it's still really going strong. The hard part is when it's kind of doing okay, you can see it fraying on the edges, and you probably should be moving off of that, but those cash flows are so enticing. And everything is just focused on protecting those cash flows. But if all of your research, your organization is pointing to a future customer that says it's not focused here, then that's where the reality, we really have to take off those rose-colored glasses and say, what's really going on here in the marketplace? And the biggest mistake that companies do is that they fall too much in love with their current customers. They love them so much, the profits, the goodwill, them being happy, NPS scores going up, that they don't look at the fact that that customer base is eroding and that proposition isn't going to be the one that carries you off into the future. So being very realistic, being very fair, actually, to who your customer is and will be, is probably the best thing you can do.
It seems like a lot of these companies, they talk a game about innovation as well, but innovation can be an offshoot or managed separately. They have a chief innovation officer maybe, but then there's this other subgroup that presents to the leadership team occasionally. But innovation is this other thing and not kind of built into the core of what they do. Do you see that in these companies?
I see it so much. We see it here in Silicon Valley with people putting up together these innovation centers. And they can be fantastic, but I think in many ways they become what I call innovation theater. It looks great, you applaud, awesome, you feel good, you walk out the theater and you go back to normal life. Nothing has changed. And it's because to actually do what's happening inside of that innovation theater means challenging all of your presumptions. And I think about, again, how hard it is to move off of what we're doing today, that the only way you can make a case for that again is that future customer. It is the one and only thing I've seen disruptive organizations do really, really well. And it's the only thing that ever convinced an organization to move off of where its status quo is. All the other things around leadership and culture are really important too. And if you don't have that strategy and customer focus, the culture can sometimes rev up the engine to make you more focused on that. But I really worry about these innovation centers because it's an excuse for all the other people in the organization going to be able to say, oh yeah, we're innovative. Those are the folks who do it, not me. So it takes that responsibility and that burden off of me for somebody else to deal with because it's too uncomfortable to sitting there.
Yeah, so we'll either have a department that does it or we'll acquire it and bring in, but we're not going to do that ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, that's what disruption is. It's painful. And I think the reason why it's painful is because it changes your notion of how all relationships work. I mean, the reason why disruption is hard is because it tips the balance of relationships, the power in relationships. And when you don't know where your power rests or how you relate to the other people, it's all being matched against, a very uncomfortable place to be. So that's why culture becomes so important, because culture provides that scaffolding to allow you to make a lot of these changes without really undoing the balance of those relationships.
What are the elements of building culture? People have talked about that for a long time, right? Like, again, how do you know they're actually doing a culture initiative that's going to work and isn't just, successory posters on a wall?
Around, yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about culture, it just comes down to two things: your beliefs and the behaviors that come from those beliefs, and behaviors also conform beliefs. So you can think about this as a two-sided parts of a same coin. And when you want to change a culture to be much more open and supportive of customers, to be fast-moving, I found 3 beliefs in our research that really drives a disruptive organization: openness, transparency, to allow the speed of information and decision-making to accelerate; agency, where every person feels a responsibility for taking on the ability to focus on that future customer; and a bias for action, meaning you don't have all the answers and you're going to take an action to be able to figure out what the answer is. And these 3 beliefs work very common across these organizations again. So a good exercise to do is to go back to your organizations and say, what beliefs keep us from focusing on that future customer, keep us from being disruptive, from driving these changes? And do a simple exercise of taking some Post-it notes, write down those beliefs, throw them against the wall, and you'll see them grouping together. And agree as a team, we don't believe these things anymore. We're going to stop believing them and start using the behaviors that support them. And then on a different wall, pull up the Post-it notes on beliefs that you think you have to adopt in order to be the type of organization you want to be. I mean, who sets up the beliefs that say you have to ask for permission before you can take some action? Who actually says that? It's an unspoken belief. But if you actually agree and support each other that you're not going to act that way anymore, you'll stop doing it. But unless you systematically go through and talk about those beliefs and say which ones matter to us, you'll never change.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about getting above the transactions, right? I am a borderline hippie for the capitalist world, but I have a firm belief that companies that exist solely as thinly veiled vessels of somebody else's wealth creation, that period's over. I don't feel like those companies should exist anymore. Like, if they don't stand for something in the world, and primarily I'm talking about a movement, and this is the thing that you and I share a lot, which is my belief that you have to stand for something. You have to believe in a movement. You have to be change in the world, right? And that people will rally around you, right? And you look at the companies that are born in this era, from WeWork to, SoulCycle to Burning Man, like, all these are just communities at their core. That's why this conference is so important, right? But they stand for something. They stand for a change. They stand for movement. I know that's a core to a lot of the thinking that you're doing as well. Can you talk about the concept of a movement and why you believe that's so important in this next era?
It's the core, I think, of what leadership looks like inside a disruptive movement. If you have a disruption strategy, it's one thing to have a strategy, it's great to have a culture, but the nexus that where all of this comes together is the leadership. And leadership in a disruptive organization looks fundamentally different. It looks and feels like a movement. And the reason why movements are so important is because you're going from state A to state B. You're crafting out that strategy to say how we get there and to keep people motivated and to get the change that you need, to push people and to carry them over those really hard obstacles, you need a movement. And I love the book, The New Power, because what they define a movement is it's a movement if it moves without you. And leaders are used to pulling all the levers and doing everything themselves. But in a truly disruptive leader, the best ones actually inspire people to do the work and inspire people to follow them on this journey. And what could be harder than to create exponential change, to create something, move people out of their comfort zones from their status quo into this world of flux where everything is changing. So in order to create that huge amount of change, the movement actually creates that scaffolding that makes it safe, that makes it not so scary because you're in this all together.
Yeah. I think another powerful example was T-Mobile. Specifically around that idea. I wonder if you could tell that story.
Yeah, so T-Mobile was number 4 in the marketplace, and they said, how do we move up? They go, do we become the urban brand, the youth brand? And they realized in doing the research that nobody was the customer brand. Nobody was really, truly fighting for the customer, so they became the uncarrier. And it sounds on the surface to be a brand repositioning, but they changed everything in the organization. They changed the way they answered the phones, the way they sold in the stores, and they changed the CEO to John Ledger, who happened to be the right person at the right time. He came and goes, oh, this is really cool. What's this thing called Twitter? And he got on it and started using it to connect with customers and employees. In fact, he did it without telling anybody. And his security team, he gets, somebody's impersonating you on Twitter. He goes, that's actually me. So he changed everything that he did, even changed the way he looked. And he, to his own admission, says, I spend between 6 and 8 hours every day just connecting with customers and employees and partners through various channels, especially digital and social channels, to make sure that we are focused on the right thing, on this movement of being the uncarrier. So he's completely passionate, kind of crazy on these things, and does things ways that he becomes very authentic and very human in the way he connects with people. And he does everything to say, we're not big business. We're not going to sit here and look at you as a number. We're going to look at you as Sarah. We're going to look at you as Jim. We're going to look at you as a person and say, you matter to us. And what's interesting is within T-Mobile, anywhere in the front lines, they're given a lot of latitude to break the rules in order to make that customer meet their needs. And if they can't meet the needs of that customer, then they tell them why, apologize, and say, I wish we could do something. Let me see what else we can do. When they have to say no, they say no as humans.
And I should mention, you're actually building out a movement of people creating movements.
Yes.
Right? So yeah, that's a very cool idea. You're just you're pulling together a network of people who are in these large organizations and who are the change makers in the world, right? The ones who are actually trying to create these movements in the world.
One of the things I discovered is that disruptors are pretty lonely, because usually when you're trying to create this change, and you probably have felt this too, like no one else in here in the organization understands what we're trying to do, trying to make this connection, drive this change. And so I wanted to create a community. It's actually my first community that I've actually done myself, and of a community of disruptors, so they can be supported in the way that they create that exponential change, because it's really hard to drive it. So how do they support each other? How do they create that connection, that support, that level of trust, so they can go back in and fight the good fight? I call it quantum because everything in a quantum network, every single additional node makes it even stronger, an exponential strength that comes from that power.
Yeah. And what are the attributes of people that you know are going to make that change happen in these organizations? Can you tell that yet?
Yes. Again, what I did a survey about 1,000 leaders and asked them, what are the things that you actually do as a leader, and correlated that against their ability to drive disruption. And there were 2 things that came out. Obviously, a change mindset. So you're comfortable with making change, you're comfortable with ambiguity, comfortable with things not working out and recovering from that. But there's also this ability to lead in a very different way, very much through other people. Again, the importance of a movement. and the ability to inspire people and empower them to make that change themselves. And that, it was interesting that that came through much stronger as an attribute of disruptors. Because what they realized is that if you're going, the more exponential change you create, not just a little bit of change, but huge amounts of change, you need to create that movement and create that network of other leaders and inspire other people to take on that mantle of leadership.
So it sounds like you're saying the companies of the future are going to be built by community managers.
I hope so.
That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I was excited to come to this because oftentimes people ask me, so community management, you got social, that was nice. That was kind of, 5, 10 years ago. What kind of strategic role do they have? I'm actually writing a piece right now about the state and future of social, because that's where I came from. And in many ways, we think of these as tactical things to do. If anything, it is the most strategic place you can be in an organization. Because where else do you have an open, honest conversation with the most important people in your organization, with your customers, with your employees, and you get to know them as people, as humans. And you really can understand them, and you can really hear from them. And I think of communities and social as the conscience of the organization, because who else is going to hold you accountable? How do you be honest and accountable to your customers other than face-to-face and hearing from them in that way? So I think in many ways, I would encourage you to go back to your leaders, your strategy leaders, your executive leaders, and saying, come into the community because this is where you can deeply engage, understand who they are today, but also explore all these different ways. Who are our future customers? Come and meet them. This is where you can find them. You don't have to look really hard. They're right there, staring you in the face, and you don't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're talking about, the idea of creating a movement, the return to the human over the technology and the command and control, all of this is part and parcel with what community has been about. And I think for a long time, community was relegated to certain functional departments or kind of people didn't understand what it did. And now you're talking about it's got to be woven throughout the tapestry of everything we do, right? That authentic connection. I mean, we've got half of the workforce or more now is millennial, and this is a generation of people who everything they care about is anathema to the way that we used to try to attract customers and connect with people in a kind of CRM data-driven way, right? They care about authentic connection. And that's the way the world should work. We should be focused on authentic connection, and businesses should be focused on that. So it sounds like what you're saying is that's the essence of all of this, is a return to the human and a deep connection to what it is they care about and where they're going.
Right. I love the technology, and I think that technology can actually enable us to do this more. The problem is that we have to look through the data. If we just use that data in the CRM database to look at somebody as a number, then technology will have failed. If the technology can give us that information and give us this full, deep picture of who this person is, so that I as a customer, I as an employee, feel that I am known, that you know me, you deeply know me and understand me and are here to meet me at the place where I want to be met. That's a beautiful place to be. And we as people may have different levels of distance of how close or not we want to be. Not everybody wants to be like shoulder to shoulder with you. Sometimes I just, need to connect, say hello, good, we're fine. Other times I need you to be right there by my side. So how can we as people who are trying to serve them better understand that state? The data can help us with that. But it's how we use that data, to what end we use that data. If every single time all you see me is just a transaction, as an NPS number to be increased, that's not knowing me. That's not meeting me where I am.
Yeah. What are the companies that were really exploring, what customers were actually going through, and what were they doing?
I think, again, they are doing things at such a deep and spread level. I'll use an example, not from a traditional organization. Southern New Hampshire University. It is this tiny, guess where it is? Southern New Hampshire. And they were this 3,000-person campus. And Paul LeBlanc came in as the president and said, I think we have an opportunity here to serve all of these people who are marginalized in society, people who are trying to go back and finish college, who they never finished. They may do a mid-year career. They may be working part-time. They may be a working mom, a stay-at-home mom, trying to come back. I mean, all these people who do not fit into the normal 4-year college examples. And they built an online educational community and started doing these courses from the university online. And now today, they're the #1 administrator of 4-year degrees in the world. They have 150,000 students that they serve online. Completely disruptive, with 4-year degrees, not like certificates or anything, but full-fledged degrees. One of their graduates is one of my social media managers, and she's fantastic. And she did it all online. So the disruptive thing that he did was make sure that everybody was focused on that student success, student graduation. It wasn't just enrolling them, it's making sure they graduated. And if they were taking too many courses, they would make them slow down, take less money from them, put more resources against them, put more money into them so that they could be successful. And it did this over and over and over again. And as a nonprofit organization, they're going to break over $1 billion this year. So this is a highly disruptive organization that continues to disrupt even just what it means to get a degree. That's not based on how many credits you get, but can you just prove competency levels? So if you can prove competency in 18 months, you've got your 4-year degree. So it's rethinking everything under the sun. And the only way he can do this is that the entire organization of about 4,000 people are aligned around what the outcome is, what that purpose is. And I literally walked around the organization and could talk to every single person about how they were living that purpose. It was absolutely clear, absolutely understood what the strategy was, because it was in every single corner that you could see. Yeah. They could all repeat the strategy, they could all repeat what their purpose and the future customer was.
I always like to say everything we do is now outcomes as a service. Like that era of software as a service or giving someone a tool and expecting that it's all going to work is kind of over, right? You really have to drive real outcomes and real change in the world.
Yeah, but that's a product and a service that you're focused on as a business. Yeah. When I ask people, when I do a lot of briefings as an analyst, and I can tell within 5 minutes if this company is going to be successful or not. And it's simply this: do they talk about the customer need that they are trying to fulfill within the first 5 minutes? If they're sitting there talking to me about their investors, showing me a NASCAR of all their customers, and talking about the product and service, and I don't hear about the customer until later, I'm like, yeah, not going to make it.
Advice so people who have a career in community, and obviously with community being so core to the ideas of disruption in your book, what advice do you have for people who are, in the business of community, and how can they align with these big ideas that are going to reshape the business world?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you think about the purpose of your community, is it there to achieve a pretty clear objective with ROIs and KPIs and everything? Take a look at those metrics again and say, do you want to revise them against a disruptive goal? Because if it's, again, I think of it as this way: you can play big or you can play go home. So how do you make your community play big? How does it have a stronger role and strategic role inside your organization to drive that exponential change, the outcome that you really wanted to see? Because every single person in this room has the ability to be a disruptor, because you are right there at the very front to understand what those needs are. So how do you leverage your position to say, how do I help make that case for this exponential change that our organization desperately needs? Is your organization even thinking about the change that they can create? Maybe you're the person who can raise that. So I would say put yourself right at the table. You have as much permission as anybody else, because you talk to the most important people every single day. That is your job. And I couldn't think of a better place for that disruption to begin and be supported by than the people in this room.
Other advice in our last minute for things people could take away today to start doing to align with the disruptive ideas that you're talking about?
I think more than anything else, it's to find the network. Again, this place is a fantastic place to do this, but being a disruptor, creating that change is exhausting. It is soul-sucking. You know you're doing it right if your stomach is churning, your palms are sweating, and you're thinking, there's no way we can continue doing this. And yet, it's living at that very edge of that comfort zone that's where the disruption happens. That's where the magic happens. And so to put yourself out there, you need a resource, you need a refuge at times to retreat from that, to be able to find that strength for yourself. We know that oftentimes community management can be soul-sucking. It's really hard. It's a really hard job. So finding that place within your own communities, within a community like this, of other community managers, I think is why you're here. But maintain that in between the sessions that you have at CMX Summit. Make sure you maintain those connections that you've made here and connect with the people who are going to support that disruptive mindset that you have.
Great. When does the book come out?
It's available September 24th, but we have postcards for everybody as you're walking out. You can get your copy now. Just go ahead and download an ebook. That's my gift to you as a community. So.
Okay. So it looks like our time is up. Do we
just get up and go?
Yeah. Really appreciate you guys sticking around for this one. I wanted to get donuts for everybody, just as a thank you, but I didn't have time to do it, Joe. Yeah. Okay, I guess everybody else left, so we'll just hang out. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.